Judith here today again to be able to talk about something that she's actually been involved in, a successful SAP project. And it's interesting that we often talk about the fact that we have failures of projects, and there's a rhetoric around in most of the LinkedIn messages or YouTube or whatever, where we're looking at it from that negative perspective, where we're not actually getting a positive outcome or delivering a successful solution. And I think it's probably time that we actually look at it and say, well, how do we actually get to the point where we celebrate the success of what successful projects do? And it's not always the fact that they've actually been able to just roll out a project, everything went right, it all worked well, and out came success. Along the way, there's a number of different things that happen along the way, and so we'll share that today in the discussion. Judith's this is a project that's fairly close to her heart, because it's one of those ones that you do when you have success. Knowing what good looks like carries you through forever. And so wherever you work for another project or whatever you do, and we do this when we deploy projects, we try and get success. And if you know what it looks like, it's much easier to be able to walk yourself towards that target. And so Judith, help us understand what success meant in this project. So give us a bit of a background of the project in itself.
Hello, Wayne, and thank you for having me here. So the project that I'm going to talk about is very close to my heart. The reason is it helped my higher purpose and also defining my career in the ERP world. So ERP has been a passion of mine, and SAP implementations, that's all I've done for a living. So this is one of those in the early stages of my career, and the stakeholders are still friends of mine, and that has defined my thinking and the progress. So when we look at it, the background of the story is this client or this project has every odds stacked against them. So the location to start with, the nearest city is 2 hours away. Wow. So it's like a physical, a small road that connects the city to that location. And the workforce had limited reading skills throughout. So it's like you're talking about 10,000 people working in a place, and only few of them can actually read an instruction. So to complicate it, there were multiple spoken languages to deal with. So English itself is hard, and especially the main language is not necessarily the main language. There are many spoken languages to deal with. And there were physical constraints associated with it. For example, things that we take for granted, electricity was limited. So we had to work with what was available. And so that means we all had to be totally aware of the constraint and work with it. And limited access to resources, right? So this was in the early early 2000s. So SAP skill set wasn't great, and so most of us working on the project either didn't speak the language, or some of them were not even from the country. So it's like, wow. It's a completely different and a truly diverse team. So we had to be really attuned with each other. And there were many more, like you had to account for the festivals and planned events that happened just because of the nature of the locations. So
yeah, just hearing what you're saying there, Judith, the fact that the workforce had limited reading skills in a number of different multiple languages. So when you're actually trying to convey or build a design or be able to actually get people to understand what you're trying to achieve, there's a lot of difficulty there. And we often talk about change. We talk about people being engaged. That's a real challenge right from there. And then obviously the other fact is, and we see this often in more modern times, when we see, some of the physical constraints could be the fact that we want to digitize things and we don't have Wi-Fi available. So some of those sort of things are issues that this is a really good reference case for us to be able to look at and be able to see you still can get success out of a project if you approach it in the right way and deal with the challenges as they arise. And so you talk about the fact that harvest season is looming, so obviously that becomes an issue for people being available.
Exactly, and harvest is a real constraint, right? So in the modern world, like where we live, Australia, harvest may not be a thing, but for that place, harvest means everyone in the location or the vicinity is working on it. And this being a manufacturing plant, whatever they produce, they bring it to this place to sell it. So the system has to be ready then by the time the harvest is finished and to be able to accept that intake. So that is a real constraint that is not necessarily negotiable. You can't move the harvest. So,
No, that's right.
and
It's
they have
it's
to,
it's
yeah,
interesting because the same thing happens with organisations. End of financial year, so I've got
yeah,
financial things that take up my time. I've got to close off all my books for that year, or for one particular organisation I worked with, where they had storm season came in. So between the end of October and the end of March, they
can't do
could they
much.
all of their
Yeah,
people were focused on the fact that we have here in Queensland a lot of storms
yeah,
and we have a lot of weather events, and so they
yeah,
couldn't actually have a lot of people released available to be able to support the project. And so that happens on so many occasions, and it's something that organisations need to factor in when they are planning their project, because if they don't consider those sorts of things, they don't get the ability to be able to have people either available,
mm,
they're trying to take on too much, and it makes it too hard to deliver. So yeah, that's a really good point, and again, a real
yeah,
constraint when you start looking at how do you get successful outcomes. So,
exactly.
and from what I look at
Mm,
here, it was a SAP digital
yeah.
transformation that you were looking at.
Yeah, it was a SAP digital transformation, and the reason for them choosing this journey, there was a lot of thought went into this decision. So, to just for context, right? So that organization has been running for over 5 generations or something. So it's like a decision like that has to be well thought out by the leaders, and the reason for them to be able to do that is they wanted to be in line with their global peers, and they consciously made a decision this is the way to go. They were totally aware of the constraints, and they also know what they will be up against. So that's a uh, very powerful decision making process, in my opinion. And I have a lot of respect for those leaders who did that. And also, they wanted this transformation enabled them to lift the profile of the organization. That means they were able to have a global presence and also a business profile that's accessible for everyone. So, for example, things like they were able to make their own electricity, produce, do whatever food processing that is needed to be able to do a finished product and be able to showcase that. That itself is a beautiful business case. And SAP as a tool has enabled that in this case. So it's like a beautiful, beautiful case study and a beautiful way to look at success. So when you look at an organization like that, which is every odd stacked against its favor, to the outcome that they have achieved, and for those who know, for those who are able to relate to, you'd know which organization I'm talking about, which is a fantastic case study. So nowadays, I'm very good friends with the stakeholders, and I still admire them for the decisions that they did, and especially
Well,
the
let's
odds that they
unpack
came
that.
against.
Let's unpack
Yeah,
that for a second
mm,
there, Judah. So the fact that they made a decision that they actually want to actually lift their profile and be global. So
yeah,
they've actually looked at and created an operating model that there was their
yeah,
vision as such. And often we find organisations, and we've
mm,
walked into organisations ourselves when we've worked on projects. You find that they really don't know. They're very good at what they have done. They don't
yeah,
know where they need to go to. And so it sounds like
yes,
in this particular circumstance, they had
yeah,
that view of saying, well, as leaders, we want to take this business to more of a global profile. We want to actually elevate
yes,
the way we operate. And so having a very clear operating
mm,
model is very, very, very valuable in our mind. And we see this is what leads to success when we work with clients today. And
yeah,
again, you start looking at where success comes from. It's those things that actually
mm,
are often overlooked. Having that vision, really getting together and having agreement. So what it sounds like even here with the
yeah,
leaders is
mm,
that they all agreed of what this global model was going to look like or how they were going to elevate the business. And that then gets
exactly.
everybody
Mm,
else thinking that same way. And so it's a great way to actually say, well, here's the reason why we're doing it. So here's the
mm,
tangible benefits. If we have better information available to us by putting this system in, we can actually leverage this operating model that we actually want to have, which is global. And so,
Yeah.
really unpicking just some of those subtleties that actually you talk about in this,
Yeah.
it really is valuable to actually have that. And whether it's SAP or whether it's any solution,
Any
it probably
system.
that's the
Yeah.
secondary piece to it because that's the enabler. But
Yeah.
having that thought and guiding and being able to share that with the solution integrator who comes in or the project team that's involved
Yeah.
in there, they then understand here's what I need to deliver for that organisation, and that's so valuable. It's we find it's a step that we take, and often when I'm doing expert witness stuff, I find
Mm.
that's the gap where people haven't taken that step, and so
Yeah.
that's it's an important thing. So you talk about here context is key, and
Yes.
understanding the big picture.
Mm.
It's so vital to understand what are we doing, what is that big picture, and then being
Mm.
able to chunk it back down for those people who actually can't see that yet because it's not there.
Yeah.
So share that with us, how that happened,
Yeah.
that higher purpose.
I still remember the time when the stakeholders communicated their vision to me, and and to other consultants working on this. And this was early 2000s, right? So we didn't have mature methodologies and everything, and SAP or any technology implementation was a big thing. And here are these guys, the owners or the stakeholders, the immediate stakeholders of the organization, communicating the vision. And that itself was so powerful. So for us as consultants, we knew we were part of a big picture and we are contributing to it. And it was able to, that communication of the vision helped in the decision making process. So that's a powerful thing. I think these a basic thing, but a very powerful thing that I think we can bring it as a stage in the whole program of work, which makes it more tangible. So we are not talking about financial gains. We are not talking about anything numbers wise. It is a big vision. So we are a part of a big vision. We are taking this organization global. So that's the message everybody needed to communicate. Yeah.
And that's right. And below that, there's
Mm.
obviously some pointers or some things
Yeah.
they talk
Mm.
about. We need better information. We need to be able to see what we're
Yes.
doing. We need to have,
Mm.
clearer processes on what we do. And
Mm.
so there are those things that cascade out of that understanding of that bigger picture. And for
Yeah.
my own thing,
Mm.
we have a program where we call it operating principles, and those operating principles allow the executive to actually articulate what that looks like. And from what you're saying here, that was
Yeah.
done even before I'd even thought about it. So
Yeah.
it just
It
goes to
was.
show
Yeah.
that many times we can learn from what smart people have done,
Exactly. Yeah.
and not try and just blunder on forward and really not have a vision or an understanding of where we're going.
Yeah. And this that vision was beautiful, right? And the other thing, as you said, the content, the three things that for me was very close is, in this case, the context was the key. So
Yep.
they had the big picture in mind. So as a result, everyone had the big picture in mind, and the higher purpose was communicated really, really well. And they also understood who they are and who they served and who they will continue serving in the future. So sometimes when you take an organization global, the current stakeholders or the current clients, yes, they'll continue to be your clients. Plus, you'll also have a new set of clients coming in and they'll have new set of requirements. And as a result, you may be producing more or differently, or you may change the product base or something. So they were all open to it. That was the beauty of it. So they were not like, okay, I'm producing 100 boxes of X now and I want to produce 1,000 boxes of X. This is more about, let's see what this vision brings and evolves, as long as it's contributing to the greater good. And that
Yeah,
was
and it
beautiful. Yeah.
might well be that instead of doing, we might still be doing that 100 boxes, but all of a sudden other clients want something slightly different, and so we can actually then see and cater for
Yeah.
that market. So it helps grow our market, but it's important to be able to recognise what's that bigger vision looking for to achieve. And
Exactly.
one of the things that I know we share in the
Mm.
past is about, and this is really dear to my heart in the sense of what works for someone may or may not work for someone else, sort of thing. And I think that's
Yeah.
important because when it comes to breaking those things of here's how we've always done it, or we
Yeah.
have people within the organisation that go, we do it this way because it's the best way. Well, they have a very
Mm.
narrow view of it, in many
Mm.
occasions. And so
Yeah.
what they do is actually need to actually go, well, how do we actually achieve what the business is looking for?
Yeah.
And that may not be exactly the same way as I've done it in the
Mm.
past, and it may actually be a better way that I do it differently. And so that breaks down those barriers of change, doesn't it? That's one of those things that we often
Yeah.
focus, we're faced with, is that change is a restrictor to
Yeah.
actually getting success,
Mm.
and that's one of those things I think is very important. And then understand what works well. I always look at
Mm.
things best practice. I hear
Mm.
so often that software vendors talk about best
Yeah.
practice. The best practice is the best practice for you as an
Who's
organisation to
best practice,
achieve what
right?
you want to get. That's the best of
Yeah.
any other practice you can actually get. And so we it's like getting to the point where you say,
Mm.
well, this is the cheapest, most optimal, the smoothest, the best return for us. That is
Yeah.
best practice for us. And I think that's a,
Yeah.
a big piece, and that often we don't consider when we are looking at organizations,
Mm.
and software vendors go, world's best practice, but let's make you all the same as everyone else. Well, then we lose that competitive
Lose.
advantage. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important
And
thing for
the
us to remember.
essence of who we are, right? So I'll
Yeah.
give you an example for this best practice. This example is powerful. So I went on to battle with the product owner in this case because there was a very specific number that had to be on payslip. So every person, every consultant said, okay, forget that number. It's not needed. Why do you want to spend so much money customizing it? Blah, blah. But that purpose of that number is the only indicator for the person who physically carries that payslip, for example, a 200 miles or 300 miles, and puts it in a location where the responsible person for the payslip goes and collects it. So
Yes.
what if that number is not there? So it's like understanding that big picture, right? And what works for someone else, that number may be immaterial. Who
Mm.
cares? Like, it satisfies all the statutory requirements, great. And that number is not a part of the statutory requirements. You can argue either way. But for this client, I remember that made a whole difference because of the nature of the workforce they had. They needed to have payslips in a specific color so they know
Yeah.
what they are. And that specific number was an indicator. So the person who was delivering it knew where to take it to.
Yeah,
So
and these are really
that's just an
important things
example. Yeah.
because as project people, they often forget they get caught in project world, and they forget that there are
Mm.
people at the other side that are actually going to use this, and things that are important to them are not necessarily what's important to the project. And if you miss
Exactly.
those things, then the ability to get engagement, to get
Yeah.
acceptance, to get people actually going, this works, and I want to be
Mm.
part of this, to actually going, there's problems with this and it's not
Yeah.
working for me. And so it's one of those things, again, we talk about, and it's
Yeah.
funny, these little things we see
Mm.
that add to success. It's about
Yeah.
seeing what the users do. And I'll share
Mm.
a different one
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
me, in the sense that
Mm.
I work for a rail company as such,
Mm.
and the tech guys had decided that they were going to do something to automate the way that they actually did some of the maintenance work. But when they actually did it, they didn't consider the way the maintenance work is done. And so what they did is actually got an iPad, which is really great. These guys have wonderful greasy hands, so touching an iPad with greasy hands is a really great idea. Not. And also then they actually put it in a way that you wouldn't actually do it in a maintenance way. Because if you've got a train, as this
Yeah.
was, you've got
Mm.
many carriages sitting together, you might do all of one side and then you do the other
And
side.
then walk
They
the
had
other
it
way.
so that you could only put it in the way that they
One
set it up.
carriage.
So
Oh my
you see
God.
the
Yeah.
users then go, well,
Mm.
this is stupid. Why would I use this? And so I go back to then putting in a
Yeah.
manual process. They write it down, get out of the pit, do all of their work, and they add extra. And it's like you're saying here, if the people in
Yeah.
this scenario didn't get that number or didn't get that pay slip or
Mm.
didn't get that advice, then all of a sudden they've got to do something differently. And that's where we fail many times with getting a successful outcome.
Yeah, so these are fundamental things that even changed me as a consultant and understanding these nuances. And all these stack up for success. So having that conscious pause to understand the client and understand what actually works in this scenario or for this client scenario or the program scenario, that's success measures, as you call it, Wayne. It's so important, and
That
it's
is.
and this investment is worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing I think that's important as a project team and a business, it's about working as one unit.
Yeah.
Often what we find is we get projects that come in and we have a project team that is very isolated to the rest of the business. And then all of a sudden we hand over something and the business starts to see it for the first time. And that's when the flags start coming up and the
Yeah.
resistance starts happening. And that's where we start to really start to erode any vision that we might have of achieving success, because what we're handing over is not necessarily anyone's had any buy-in, any
Mm.
ownership. And the leaders, they get probably a vague understanding of how the business operates.
Mm.
It's not until the people who actually do the day-to-day work see the solution, and if they can absorb that solution and go, actually, this works for me, happy
Mm.
days. You've really got a good chance of actually getting a successful outcome. But if we have that where we are two separate divisions, we don't work as one unit, then
Yeah.
then that's a real challenge, isn't it? And it sounds like in
Mm.
this, that was one of the things that also added to success.
Yeah.
It was worked as
So
one unit.
the way I see it is it's fundamental, right? Any house that is divided in itself is not going to stand. We have seen that in organizations, we have seen that in companies day after day. If two people decide to walk together, they need to be together.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's the only way to make the success. So in this case, people demonstrated, actively took time to demonstrate unity. So this is part
Wow.
of the ancient, or what do you call, the traditions that has been handed over. So one of the things they did, which is a very welcoming thing, was there was a celebration of a festival, and all of us working on the program was invited to that celebration. It was a 3 day celebration. So what it means is, yes, the owners and the stakeholders demonstrated an extension of invitation, and it wasn't a verbal invitation, it was an invitation from the heart. So all of us, I remember everyone making time to attend that 3 day festival. So some traditional project ways of looking at it, it's like, what did you get out of the 3 days? What was the output? What was the document? Nothing. But it showed unity, and it
Yes.
helped everyone understand that we are a part of them. And we all did and most of us did the walk around the factory premises, so we know what people are looking for when they are walking. So when the solutions is designed, we know what it is, and we know what sort of workforce that everyone's having, right? So it's like, for example, a ship supervisor cannot call up backup resources and say, can you please come in? It's like, because the person lives 1 hour away. Come on, it's not going to work. So the planning has to be really intact for the next 3, 4 weeks. So we need to know who's having a wedding, or who's expecting a child, or whose extended family is going what. That information is very, very powerful. So
It
at
is.
one point, so one of the decisions in the data load that we had to make was, yeah, we need every data from 1964 loaded in the system. So it's like, yes, there was a clause in the contract saying we'll load last 3 years of data because that was the norm at that time. And then we had to literally fight as consultants, and we go, we need every data from 1964 because this weather pattern or something happens only for 25 years. For this guy to be able to plan the MRP, he would need he would need
Yeah.
1964 data. But these are very simple things. The consultants were able to enhance the success because they were working as one unit, and this was fantastic. So some of them, yeah.
And it's delivering that outcome, isn't
Mm.
it? It's
Yeah,
why do organisations take on these sorts of projects? Is
yeah.
because they actually are looking to solve their problem, and their problem is they
Mm.
want to get better, they want to actually improve,
Yep.
they want to change the way they operate, but they also need information that's usable and available to them. Often, as software integrators, we find that we've got a contract that says we can only put in so much, and we're
Yeah.
going to cut it off at that. Does that then stop it from actually being functional? And then is that then lead it to be a point where it really isn't of value to the organisation anymore? So all of that
Yeah.
money and all of that time spent, and I think what you point out here is a
Mm.
very good one in the sense of,
Yeah.
often people want all of their data, but if there's a
Yeah.
meaningful reason why they need all of that data, then why not?
Great.
But if
Yeah.
but if there's
Mm.
if there's no meaningful reason, then obviously we look at how
Mm.
much we can actually put.
Yeah.
But understanding it, I think, and listening to the to
Yeah.
the to the vendor or the organisation, because that gives us why it actually will work for us and what's of
Yeah.
value to them. And when we walk away,
Mm.
like you have now, you have the fondest memories of
Yeah.
this outcome,
Mm.
but it's because it was a success. Because probably today you can actually look back and talk to those people and go, when we did that,
Yeah.
we listened to you guys. Was it a success? And that's what you'd be hearing from them. And I think that's really
Yeah.
powerful.
And they like when the stakeholders come in, and at one point we'll have them in the session, and they always talk about these little things which contributed to the success. And and even now, when people are considering data lakes and everything, which is a great concept, and this organization would move to that, but these are the subtle things that we did to set up the organization for success. And success, as always, stacks on itself, so which is fantastic. And and we walk out with the fondest memories. Like, as consultants, I am best friends with the MRP consultant, and we still talk about how we went for that 1964 and how much work actually it was for us to understand first and convince and get ourselves convinced and bring others on board and all that. So all this happened because we were working as one unit, and we
Yes.
celebrated every good and the bad, because the founders and us, all of us, believed in it. You don't learn a lot from success. Yes, it's a day of celebration, and after that, business as usual. But you'll have a lifetime of learning from every event that did not go in your favor. So
Exactly right.
that was
Yeah.
the one to capitalize. So
Mm.
yeah.
And it's interesting in the sense that,
Mm.
I often, and we've had this where
Mm.
everyone works to get to go live. Well, go live is not
Yeah.
really where success happens. It's we've created a project, we're actually now handing it over to the people to use. The success is really how well that system delivers what we set out for it to deliver, and having that big picture, does it deliver on that big picture? And by getting to that, working as one unit delivers our ability to have a solution that actually then continually can be incrementally improved by the way people operate, because they've got a really solid system that they're working with. And I think that's an important
Mm.
step we look at it and say, well, go live is going to be success. Well, we'll never see success at go
Yeah.
live. We
Yeah.
might see the solution integrators see success because they say, well, we've finished the project and hopefully it was on time and it was on budget, and that's their measure of success. But for an
Yeah.
organisation, that is only just a milestone in their
Yeah.
journey. And I think that that's one of those things that success comes from really getting value. And looking back, as you've talked
Mm.
about with this one, this isn't a new project that's just gone live. This
Oh,
has
yeah.
been live for many years, and they're still reveling in that the fact we did it right. We understood what we needed to do.
Exactly.
The project team understood what we wanted. All
Yeah.
of those are really fundamental things that breed success. And I think
Yeah.
that some of those learnings, even in the era that this was
Mm.
put through, we could adopt today. I'm
Oh,
sure we
yeah.
should adopt today.
We should be doing it today,
Yeah.
right? And this is like they've given us a template to work with, so capitalize
Mm.
what we can, right? Yeah.
And Judith, I know you've written a
Yeah.
book, and it's about
Yeah.
the about ancient wisdom, and I think
Yeah.
one of those things that we should never overlook ancient wisdom, it's one of those things that there's many things in there that people did in the past to actually overcome things that possibly could happen.
Yeah.
That today we go, oh no, we don't need to do that, and take a shortcut or cut a corner. And
Yeah.
that's where often we are found, and I know for myself, I'm
Mm.
often found in front of a litigator saying, why did that go wrong? And when you
Mm.
start looking at why all those shortcuts happened, they didn't actually apply many of these principles that you've
Yeah.
talked about in
Mm.
this, and you talk about in your book,
Yeah.
about how some of those things that we did in the past. Ancient
Mm.
leaders actually
Yeah.
did it for a reason. They didn't actually do it just for the sake of feeling good,
Yeah.
but the outcome was very strong, and so really really powerful stuff. And so
That's
I think there's a
very
lot to be
powerful,
learned
right?
from the past. Mm.
Yeah. So, and for us as individuals and as organizations, as you say, there is a lot we can learn from ancient wisdom, and having that conscious pause, having that understanding of who we are and our vision and everything, plays a beautiful role. Yes, there is constraints, timelines, budgets, all those we need to manage, but let's look at our statistics, right? So projects that we manage with just this pure any put up methodology, manage it by constraints, whatever. And we are reporting a lot of failures. So let's change the narrative. Let's understand what works. Let's understand and set things up for success. So people can keep talking about success and we can enjoy the success as it comes along. So that's one
no,
of
I
the
agree.
things. Yeah.
And often it's about in this modern world we talk about success. I think what we talk about here is the real tangible things that actually deliver success. And often it's in a world where we are constrained now by terms and conditions and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
And this to me sits above that, because the terms and conditions that will come out if we've got this vision and we've got this understanding and we understand how we want to deploy it, the terms and conditions that will be suitable will come out. So that's one of those things. Whereas we try and overlay constraints of terms and conditions that actually don't always deliver on what we're trying to achieve. So I think that what we're seeing here is that it's about looking at a project, what's the vision, how do we want to do it, and then building all of those other things that help us manage it. How do we actually go about what we're doing to deliver it, I think is important. So Thank you, Judith. This has been great. It's good to talk about success. It's
Exactly,
hopefully
right.
a smile on my face in the sense that talking about success is far better than failure, and there have been successes. And we don't hear enough about how successful organisations have been, or how people who have worked with deploying those, what are those things, those subtle things that actually made that a success. So thank you today, Judith, for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Wayne, and the to the listeners who are listening. So what Wayne and I would recommend is a conscious pause. Know who you are, understand what's important to you, have the big picture in mind, and get someone to validate it for you. Because any perspective having multiple perspectives is better, and work as one unit. Get the right people working with you and the right people working for you. They are the ones who will battle your cause, and surround yourselves with advisors who have your best interest in mind, and capitalize.
And you raise a very, very good point, Judith. And it's one of those things that often we find today where, if I'm asking someone, is that person going to answer me with a biased view? So is it that they're actually saying, well, if I do it this way, it'll be easier and simpler for me, and that's my shortcut, and I get the benefit from that? Or is it the best way for the client or the customer to get the best outcome? And so I think that when you're actually choosing people to actually work with as organisations, it's about saying, well, who is the person who can give me advice that I know I could trust and I could actually bank on that, in the sense that it isn't where it's biasing any one point of view. It's about saying, well, let's, as the customer, get the best for you. Not have this view that, well, I'll get more money from that if you do that, or I'll be in a better advantage. Not you, the customer, will be in a better place. And I think that independence, or those sorts of people that actually have that stamp of integrity and independence on the way they do things, is vitally important. We do have to work with people that have that bias, and we have to manage that, of course, but they shouldn't be your first point of call when it comes to sourcing that information. And so very, very, very interesting to be able to call that out as well. Thank you, Judith. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for that, Wayne. And hopefully this session is useful for us and to those who receive it.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing the feedback from the viewers when they put some comments in, or maybe ask some questions, and look forward to chatting with you again sometime soon, Judith.
Thank you.
Okay, signing off from the Digital Transformation Whisperer podcast again, and this time we talked about success. How good is that?